All right, we are live. Well,
Awesome.
hello everyone. Welcome once again to the Advent Media Connect. I'm also sitting here with James Bowen. James Bowen, what do we have to share with the people today that you felt was so significant that we keep an eye on things today?
Well, we are watching the Senate confirmation hearing, or one of the initial hearings at least, for Jonathan Berry. And Jonathan Berry is somebody we've been paying attention to for quite a while. I think that the first time that I got introduced to him was actually Project 2025 sermon by a certain Ivor Myers, probably like 2 years ago. And so since then, I've kind of been watching Project 2025, did a video with it a little over a year ago with Little Light Studios. And so we talked about it then, but we've been watching this manifesto for a long time. And Jonathan Berry is the author of Chapter 18, which is the labor section. And in that labor section, he is seeking to amend possibly the Fair Labor Standards Act to require time and a half pay for workers, for their employees who work on Sunday. Now, at first glance, it seems like a very mild proposition. I mean, like, it's not exactly requiring a shutdown per se, but in the American Moment in 2023, he had an interview where he explained his position on this a little more. And he viewed this as not a panacea, but just to get the conversation started. So, what that sounds to me like is this isn't going to be sufficient. This is just to get the ball rolling and get the discussion started. So, he's wanting to agitate along these lines and to get people more, into it. Now, one of the things that somebody pointed out to him in that YouTube channel was, hey, if you require employers pay time and a half on Sundays, aren't more people just going to want to work on Sundays? Like, hey, get time and a half pay, why not? Mandatory. And so his that's where he explained it, once again, it's not a panacea. So I could see more people wanting to work on Sunday as a result, and that creating some backlash where employers might not be happy with it. Uh, you might end up with people who are not happy about it for other religious reasons, and there could be some agitation and whatnot as a result, to where ultimately the law progresses into something greater. Since then, he's talked about the Chick-fil-A rule. He's talked about closing laws and whatnot. So there's definitely enough dialogue, enough rhetoric there to establish that this isn't going to be something that's going to be a one-time thing. It's going to be something that's going to build and grow. So that's been some of the concerns that I've seen. Have you watched any of his videos on the American Moment
Oh
or
yeah,
some of
I'm
those?
I'm familiar with his work. I've listened and followed carefully as well. Not maybe not as careful as you have, but definitely he's gotten my attention on so many things. There seems to be some obvious contradictions as well
Hmm.
to some of his claims. On one level, he's like, we try to protect workers, we try to encourage, and so on. But I did notice in the way that it was worded in Project 2025, it's an effort for employers to pretty much close on Sunday. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, I
Mhm.
don't want to pay anybody extra just because they're coming to work on this day. Well, we're just going to close it, but that gives that gave credence to Sunday laws, and he gives a reason for the keeping of the day as a holy day.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it does lay the foundation for Sunday law, although he doesn't. Some may refer to it as a nothing burger. Well, it's something. It opens the door. It's like an entering wedge that could eventually lead to more Sunday laws. So it's almost like creating this level of sympathy for Sunday keeping
Mm.
under the notion of the Labor Act. And I also find a parallel with the Labor Act, and that what Constantine has done when he first
Mhm.
Sunday laws. Also, there was like this idea of making this day special, and also certain individuals there was a clause in that law of Constantine as well that, hey, if you work in the field and so on, you can certainly take that day off, and it's okay. But we know what history have shown and how far this stuff was used and abused. And so the thing is this going to happen again? We can tell Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9, that which has been is now, which is to be has already been, and God requires that which is past. So I can see how history is about to be repeated in the light of these Sunday laws.
Yeah, one of the scary things that I see is he frequently appeals to American tradition as a means of sounding patriotic and sounding, very much like we're reckoning back to the founders of this nation. And that's a common theme that I see a lot of the Christian nationalists doing, is trying to reckon back to the early stages of American history as a means of establishing, the tradition and the value and what they're trying to push. But, if we go back, and this is one of the things that I commented in a letter opposing his nomination, was if you go back to American tradition in 1612, the third penalty for violating Sunday rest then was the death penalty. So there's very, very, problematic aspects of that tradition that as students of Bible prophecy, we know that's where it's going to go. We know that it's going down that direction, but these people don't see that. They're already appealing to the tradition, but they're not recognizing just what that tradition contained.
Amen. Amen. You say there's a live video that's happening now. Is that what we're saying? Can we put that on? You have sharing. You can share the screen. If you want me to share it on my end, it's fine as well.
Yeah, it might be good if you can share it on your end because not sure if the audio feed would come through clearly. You may have a way to port the audio in better.
Okay. All right. Can you put a link in the chat, and I'm gonna pull that up on my end.
Yeah, 1 second. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, interesting times, man. Interesting times in which we live.
One
All
of the
right.
things that he commented on too previously for the American moment was it was always a state decision to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's avoiding is what happened in the States. You
Mm-hmm.
had people that were a very much pro-enforcement to the nth degree. And they actually created, if you want to talk about like Soviet Russia or some of the times in history where there's been coercion and whatnot. Oh, here we are.
All right, it is live.
And for your willingness to serve our
Okay,
country.
let's get to it.
The committee will hear from Mr. Jonathan Berry, nominated for Solicitor at the Department of Labor, DOL.
Ooh.
If confirmed, Mr. Berry committed to refocus the Solicitor's Office on providing workers and employers with due process and ensuring DOL's actions are rooted in the law. Mr. Berry's extensive experience in labor and employment law, as well as his experience advocating for workers' rights, will be an asset to the department when confirmed. The committee is also considering Mr. Andrew Rogers, nominated to lead DOL's Wage and Hour Division. Under the Biden administration, the Wage and Hour Division struggled to curb the troubling rise of child labor and exploitation. It also pushed Biden's independent contractor policy, threatening the ability of over 27 million independent workers to choose when and where and how they want to work. As a former wage and hour official in the first Trump administration, Mr. Rogers will bring much-needed experience as the agency looks to get back on track to better protect and support American workers.
So there is a full screen
We'll then
option in the
hear
lower
from
right-hand
former
corner of
Congressman
the
Anthony,
video.
Despacito,
There you go.
nominated for DOL Attorney General. If confirmed, I'm smiling because Mr. Despacito said in New York he could never wear a seersucker. So whenever I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh my God. If confirmed, Congressman Despacito will be a crucial part of the president's goal to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse.
That's good enough.
He committed to working with Congress to ensure DOL programs are being implemented effectively to identify areas for reform. Congressman Despacito's experience as a former member of Congress and as a police detective will be a valuable resource in accomplishing this mission. Lastly, the committee will consider Ms. Andrea Lucas, acting chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who is being renominated as an EEOC commissioner. Ms. Lucas has a strong record of protecting workers from discrimination and ensuring EEOC follows the law as Congress wrote the law. Under her leadership, EEOC has a year-to-date 7% increase in monetary recoveries for workers filing discrimination complaints. If confirmed, I look forward to our continued collaboration, ensuring a safe working environment for all Americans. Thank you again for appearing. With that, we shall proceed to opening statements. And with that, Mr. Berry.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy.
Am I supposed to, excuse me?
Comes the
I need to
man.
give you another introduction here. I apologize. We're joined today by Jonathan Berry, President Trump's nominee for Solicitor of Labor. If confirmed, Mr. Berry will act as the General Counsel for the Department of Labor, DOL. The Solicitor's Office ensures that the nation's labor laws are enforced by representing the Secretary and Department's agencies in all necessary litigation, both through enforcement actions and by defending DOL against lawsuits. He is an attorney with experience advancing labor policies at DOL, advocating for stronger worker protections that are not overly onerous for job creators, while pursuing litigation against policies that harm workers and employers. He is a Yale College graduate, where he is a National Merit Scholar, and a Columbia University School of Law grad. I look forward to hearing from you today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cassidy, and all the members of this committee. I will start by expressing my gratitude to God for the uncountable blessings in my life, including this opportunity to serve Him and our Republic should the Senate confirm me. I want to thank President Donald J. Trump for putting his trust in me to return to the Department of Labor, and more importantly, to thank him for his unflagging courage on behalf of the American people over the past decade, especially in the last year against unrelenting elite hostility and multiple attempts to murder Trump for putting his trust. I want to thank Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer and my old friend and colleague, Deputy Secretary Keith Sonderling, for all of their support of my nomination to return to the department we love. I want to thank my team at Boyd & Gray, PLLC, for all their love and support. My dear friend and partner, Michael, is here to represent them all. And finally, my family. My wonderful wife, Megan, is here today, allowing me to thank her personally for all that she has done to support me in over 15 years of marriage, most especially in raising up and homeschooling our precious children. Our oldest four are here: Miriam, Virginia, Simon, and Helena. And I hope the younger four have the chance to watch the stream at home with our friends and hopefully they're not setting the house on fire in our absence. I'm grateful that my brother Daniel and my sister Samantha are watching this remotely with their families. And I'm grateful that our parents, Jim and Karen Berry, could come, so I can likewise thank them in person for all their sacrifices that have gone into making me who I am. My dad is an attorney, as was his father before him, my grandfather. And it was from my dad that I learned not only the value of hard work, which my mother also taught me as a successful small business owner, but that the workplace itself was charged with moral meaning. You see, employment law was always a big part of his practice, and I grew up at our dinner table hearing stories about case after case of people behaving badly in the office or on the warehouse floor. So for me, the law's influence on the world of work has always been where I've directed my attention because of my dad. That's why I've returned to the topic over and over again in my professional work, as a practicing lawyer and as someone who has tried to contribute to the policy conversation off and on for 2 decades. For me, the inflection point came in 2018 when I had the privilege to lead the department's policy office, first under Secretary Alex Acosta and then Secretary Jean Scalia. There, I focused more specifically on workers and on how to better protect them while honoring employers' essential role as job creators. I remain extremely proud of the work we were able to do, including with Keith Sonderling and my fellow nominee here, my friend Andy Rogers. In the last 5 years, my focus on the law's treatment of work has only intensified. I'm proud that my firm repeatedly challenged the previous administration's overreach, from OSHA's unlawful COVID mandate to ETA's illegal intrusion of DEI into registered apprenticeships to EBSA's encouragement of ESG under ERISA to the detriment of retirement security. I'm proud that we've represented employers against unlawful federal actions and that we've represented workers mistreated by their employers. And I've been privileged to use those experiences to refine my own thinking on employment law in hopes of contributing to a better understanding of how the law can and should build up the dignity of labor. This past Labor Day, I published my working vision statement at First Things, quote, "The overarching goal of a just policy about work should be to reinforce the nature of work as service," unquote. Work is service to God. It's service to family, to community, and to nation. And it is vindicating work as service that will be my greatest honor if confirmed as solicitor. Work can't be service, not fully, when it does not also help us serve our families and our communities. If your employer is holding back the wages you need to support those depending on you, if you're unduly risking life and limb on the job, if stewards are faithless with your retirement savings. If confirmed as solicitor, it would be my solemn responsibility to vindicate these rights and more of workers before our courts of law. And it would likewise be my responsibility to give my best possible advice to the Secretary on what the law does and does not authorize, on the good work that you, the Congress, have commissioned DOL to do. I thank you for the privilege of speaking with you today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Our next nominee is Andrew Rogers, President Trump's nominee to be Wage and Hour Administrator, a Maine resident. Mr. Rogers served as Chief Counsel to the Republican EEOC Acting Chair Andrea Lucas. He is currently the Acting General Counsel to the EEOC. Before joining the EEOC, he served in the Wage and Hour
We can
Division,
maybe share a few
focusing on
thoughts here and
regulations
there
opinion letters.
while we're waiting for
Yeah,
him
He
to
practiced
answer some
law
questions.
to labor and employment
yeah.
law
So
at
one of the things that he mentioned was First Things, if I remember correctly, which I think Rusty Reno is the one that's actually associated with that. So First Things is kind of, it is Rusty Reno. And that struck me right there because Rusty Reno is one of the individuals we've been watching online advocating for blue laws as well. So he's another individual who's associated with that. Of course, in this first little aspect here, we haven't heard him mention Sunday laws in particular, but one of the things that he does mention very much is the morality of workplace law. And the concern that I have with that is, if you look at Alonzo Jones, when he last appeared to this committee, he was very careful to make a distinction between moral law and civil law. And there's a difference between the two. If you go back to Webster's dictionary, where moral law is defined as what's between man and God, what is owed God, and civil law, which is between men. And I think he's conflating the two in his definition there. So a moral government or a moral law has to have a moral judge.
Correct.
And anytime you try and do that, you're going to step into God's position right there.
That's right.
And a civil we don't live in a moral government. We live in a civil government. We live under civil law here in the United States of America.
Correct.
And so when I start to hear him go down that road, it is the same thing that Alonzo Jones responded to back in 1888.
That's right. And the other concern that I have is who is to interpret these moral laws? Which religious body is going to do that? Because not only is the Christian world so divided, we don't even have the same interpretation on Scripture and the way we look at the law of God. And you can also ask which version of the law of God, because the Catholics has their version, and we have our version. We have the Protestant version. So it goes to show which law are we talking about here? And one thing you said, moral law versus civil laws. Even in the Ten Commandments, God separated the tablets of stones in two different ones, the first four in the first table, last six He's putting a division between those laws. And oftentimes, reference is made to Romans chapter 13 as an excuse for enforcing moral laws. But Romans chapter 13 only quotes from the second table of the Decalogue, showing that no government should be touching any of the first four. Now you get into the personal relationship with God kind of thing. You get into that liberty of conscience violation. And this is one thing that is left between God and his man. It is not something that any government should enforce. And you have examples in the Bible when this is being done, and as drastic of a thing it has always been. When Saul, on the absence of King Samuel, the prophet, offered sacrifice, which was only allotted to the priest to do, God was upset with him. And we've found other examples in the Bible where God puts a difference between separation of power. The activities of the king versus the activities of the priest ought not to become one. When they do, we do have a major violation. And also last day events, 125 tells us that the Sunday movement is now making its way in darkness, and the leaders are concealing the true issue. And many unite in this movement do not see themselves whether the undercurrent is standing. They are working in blindness. And I would say, I don't think it's no longer in darkness now. It's right in front of our face. They're openly talking about this issue. It's no longer in darkness. But I think some of these men, when you listen to his introduction, family, children, wife, oh, that's great. These are the things that we stand for. We're strong for families and children and workers and everything like that. But how far are you going to go with this? Is then this another overcorrection to DEI policies, which were very problematic when you look at how certain policies with diversity, equity, and inclusion were implemented. Other people were losing their jobs because of different persons of skin color needed to have a certain position, or sexual orientation were placed above. These things were wrong. But now, if you plan on fixing some of these bad policies from the previous administration, are you going to go as far as to implement policies that will violate liberty of conscience? That is just as wrong. Therefore, we have to push back against both extremes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just recently trying to look up there was a statement that Walter Veith uses from Martin Luther about, and it's actually kind of the motto for his Clash of Minds series, let the minds clash, but keep the fists down. And it's actually back in Luther's Table Talks, where Luther responds to the inhabitants and citizens who had uprised and stormed the cathedral and drove out more than 200 monks and nuns and buried the sanctuary. Luther said, "Oh, that's not good. Such violent deeds and plans do great harm to the gospel, annoy many people, and provoke the tyrants. They want us to fish. They want the fish out of the hook with their fists." When Isaiah 11 verse 4 and Paul 2:8 say, "I will crush him, the Antichrist, with the rod of my mouth, and with the spirit of his lips, he will put him to death. With that one must strike the papacy. Violence cannot disturb or preserve, for it is built on lies and stands on them. Therefore, such a kingdom must be turned around and overthrown with the word of truth." I'm reading from a translation here, but you can find more discussion in Luther's Table Talks about this. His solution for beating the papacy was not about using force, but about responding with the word of God. And it is the word of God that we advance Christ's kingdom, not with law in matters of morality. The other aspect that Alonzo Jones commented here for moral law was actually the principle that true moral law, true morality, biblical morality, if you look at Matthew 5, for example, carries into the thoughts of an individual, into his obedience. So, when Christ says, behold, you've heard it said that, about adultery and whatnot. But he says, if you even look on a woman with lust, you've committed adultery already. So the moral law of God actually encompasses our thoughts. But Caesar has no ability to read the thoughts of mankind. The only thing that Caesar can actually have any idea of what's really going on is outward civil behavior. He cannot read the thoughts of mankind, and the only way that you can actually try and enforce moral law is with an inquisition. That's the way it's been done at every point up to this point. When you try and enforce moral law, when man tries to do that and tries to read and discern, then it's they've come along with an inquisition and tried to force the mind and force confession and enter into the mind of man. But that's not something that man has the capacity, and that's very much principles consistent with the papacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said the key word at the end. These principles are consistent with the papacy because ultimately, behind some of these policies, you will find all the fingerprints of Rome. Even though the players themselves may not be of the Catholic faith, but they are what the Bible refers to in Revelation 17, that the mother of harlot has her daughters, and the daughters co-sign to the mother's behavior. And one thing in particular that they all have in common, and there's two things highlighted in the spirit of prophecy, is Sunday's sacredness and the immortality of the soul. If you were to combine those two doctrinal positions, you can pretty much unite all the religion in the world, even though they may not agree on Sunday. But with the immortality of the soul, you have an enduring wedge here. And also, we are told, even as God's people, it is not even safe for us to unite with these movements, even though they may have advocate for things that are that are good in and of themselves that you and I cannot disagree with. We know eventually where this is going to go. In Great Controversy, I think it's 587 here, it speaks about this class puts forth the claim that the false spreading of corruption is largely attributable to the desecration of the so-called Christian Sabbath, and that the enforcement of Sunday observance will greatly improve the morals of society. Going back to your word, the morals of society. This claim is especially urged in America, where the doctrine of the true Sabbath has been widely preached. Here, the temperance work, one of the most prominent and important of moral reforms, is often combined with the Sunday movement, and the Sunday advocates represent themselves as laboring to promote to the highest interests of society those who refuse to unite with them or denounce as the enemies of the temperance and reform. He went on to say that the fact that a movement is established, okay, let me say this again. But the fact that a movement to establish error is connected with a work that is in itself good is not an argument in favor of the error. We may disguise poison by mingling it with wholesome food, but we do not change its nature. On the contrary, it is rendered more dangerous, for it is more likely to be taken unawares. So, and we are told we cannot unite with this movement because ultimately it will set aside the commandments of God, fulfilling Psalms chapter 119, I believe it's 160 something, where it says it is time for thee, Lord, to work because they have made void your law. This is why we can't unite with this ultimately. No matter what they are saying, there are certain things you and I can agree with, certain principles that we can say, sure, and we want fair treatment for all people. We want women's rights to be respected. But as enforcing religious laws in the name of Sunday keeping and stuff like that, we can't stand with that.
Yeah, there's a story here in 1888 that Alonzo Jones shared before the United States Labor Committee. What was the result of some of these blue laws in America? He tells it thusly. 5 years ago, a young man newly married came to county from Ohio. He and his wife were Seventh-day Baptists. The young girl had left father and mother, brothers and sisters, and all her dear friends of her childhood to follow her young husband to Arkansas. To them, the land of promise. The light of love sparkled in her bright young eyes. The roses of health were upon her cheeks, and her silvery laugh was sweet music of which her young husband, never wearied. They purchased a little farm, and soon by tireless industry and frugal thrift, their home blossomed like a rose in the wilderness. After a while, a fair young babe came to them to brighten the sunshine and sweeten the bird songs. They were happy in each other's affection and love for the little one. For them, all things work together for good. For their humble, trusting way, they worship God and love their fellow man. 2 years ago, the law under which their prosperity and happiness had its growth was repealed. Accursed be the day which brought such a foul blot upon our state's fair fame. A change, sudden, cold, and blasting as an Arctic storm, came upon their lives. He was reported, the husband, to The hero of my sad story was observed by an envious, jealous neighbor quietly working as he believed God had commanded him on Sunday. He was reported to that inquisitorial relic of barbarism, the grand jury, indicted, tried, convicted, and thrown into jail because his conscience would not let him pay the fine. Week after week, dragged his slow length along. I'll pause here just for a second. Is Senator Cassidy addressing one of our folks yet?
This committee.
Oh,
It is an
no.
honor to
Next one.
appear
No. Okay.
before this committee as a nominee for a
Yeah.
second term on the
Next nominee. So
Mhm.
day after day, he was ultimately thrown into jail because his conscience would not let him pay the fine. Week after week, dragged its slow length along, day after day, the young wife, with baby in her arms, watched at the gate for his coming. And like Tennyson's Mariana, she only said, "My life is dreary, he cometh not." She said, "I am weary, weary, I would that I were dead." Then baby sickened and died. The light in the young wife's eyes faded out in tears. Her silvery laugh changed to low wailing sobs. Pale-faced misery snatched the roses from her cheeks
Mhm.
and planted in their stead her own pallid hue. Sir, how can I go on? At length the cruel law was appeased, and this inoffensive citizen, except that he had loved God and sought to obey him, was released from prison and dragged his weary feet to his happy home he had left a few short weeks before. He met his neighbors at the gate bearing a coffin. He asked no questions. His heart told him all. He knew not, he could never know of her lonely hours, her bitter tears, and the weary watching and waiting of appeals to God, that God for whom she had suffered so much, for help in the hour of her extremity of baby sickness and death.
Mhm.
He could not know of these, but he went to them quiet country burial place, and saw beside the open grave a little mound with dirt freshly heaped upon it. And then he knew that God had taken both his heart's idols, and he was left alone. His grief was too deep for tears. With staring eyes, he saw them lower the body of his young wife into the grave. He heard the clods rattle upon the coffin, and it seemed as if they were falling upon his heart.
Mhm.
The work was done, and they left him with his dead, and he threw himself down between the graves with an arm across each little mound as tears came in torrents and kept his heart from breaking.
Mhm.
And then he sobbed his broken farewell to his darlings and left Arkansas forever, left it, sir, as hundreds of others were preparing to leave if this General Assembly fails to restore to them the protection of their rights under the Constitution, national and state. Now, this was a story that Alonzo Jones told, a true story about some of the persecution that resulted as a result of these state blue laws, which are blithely talked about as though there was nothing major to them. And in recent years, absent the vehemence of some of the Christian nationalists, closing for a few hours in the morning for alcohol sales, most people, I think, look at these laws as benign and really not that big of a problem. But the reality back when this was enforced in the 19th century, and there were similar movements to push to establish, Christ as king, in a sense temporally here and now. There were people that lost their lives as a result of these laws and their enforcement. And there were many, many, many accounts. We actually recently downloaded from newspapers.com over 30 newspapers detailing across the nation Adventists who were arrested, including a multitude here in Chattanooga. The Chattanooga Times or Sunday Times recorded multiple who were arrested in Ray County.
Mhm.
So that's up near Dayton, actually not too far away. And
So you
so
you have all of this material available at the
yes,
moment. Okay.
yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
we've got
that would be something to discuss. Can you
yeah.
share some of it maybe later
Uh,
on today if we have time after the inauguration? Well, if there
well,
is an inauguration today.
yeah, I gotta work with my team here because we actually got a episode we're getting ready to shoot on all of that. But so I can't. We have one of ours who just worked
Mhm.
really hard to get all that down. So we're gonna be shooting it here soon. But
Okay.
yeah, there's another account with the American State Papers about an R.M. King who was
Mm.
arrested and tried here. And actually, I think this past Sunday or Sabbath, Dr. O actually talked about some of the uh, back and forth
Mm.
and the depositions that were taking place. So he
Mm.
was another individual who was persecuted. Interesting fact, one of the things that these Sunday laws were supposed to be about morality and about you know assisting in uh, giving people an opportunity to have time with family, etc. But oftentimes it was the Sabbatarians, the Seventh-day Sabbath keepers, who were prosecuted by Sunday keepers
Mm,
who, after the fact, and in the case of R.M. King,
mm,
there was actually a story about it. The individual who made the allegation against him was later on, like himself, publicly tried for some very base crimes of a much darker hue than, hey, I happen to see my neighbor out there plowing his field on a Sunday.
mhm,
So there was a lot of hypocrisy in the individuals who enforced these back in the day
mhm.
and who made the allegation. So yeah, the history there is one very sad for sure.
All right. Let's take a listen to see if Mr. Cassidy has anything.
The challenge back to Congress. You're charged to make sure that people are not discriminated against based upon factors including genetics. I was once told to a fellow, a CEO, that when he has a candidate come to him as an applicant, he can request, and people have scoured their search history online. And so if they're searching for cystic fibrosis or for in vitro fertilization, as if to learn about it because it applies to them, the employer might make a decision not to hire on the idea that they are taking on a very expensive medical procedure, or maybe they have cystic fibrosis and they want to check. You see where I'm going with this? Sure. Now, I think Congress is actually interested, will be interested in the coming months over issues of data brokers. So any
All right.
thoughts about that, how we end up having
We'll wait for our man to come on the screen here. And I really appreciate that story you just shared here as well and made the connection of oftentimes when these religious laws are implemented, it always brings about persecution for a group of people who refuse to bow. And again, you can see how the history is about to be repeated. But also in the life of Jesus, like, wasn't he also persecuted by religious men united with the state, implementing laws that he could not go along with? You know, oftentimes when you look at the life of Jesus, and you can simply say, yeah, we know he died for our sins and he was supposed to die. It was prophetic in nature. He was the Messiah. But also when you look at some of the reasons why they put him to death, you begin to examine each one of them, something very interesting begins to happen. Like at the top of the reasons, now they had many accusations, but the reasons he was put to death was, well, he was considered to be divisive and insubordination to a degree because he did not want to go along with, he was somewhat not satisfying the church nor the state in a sense. But one of the core reasons for it was because of the way Jesus violated the tradition of the elders when it comes to Sabbath keeping. That is actually one of the one of the main reasons why Christ was put to death, was he is not keeping the Sabbath the way. And if you notice, many of the arguments against Jesus, like the Sabbath was at the very top of their accusations, and the scribes and the Pharisees. So even though they use the temple argument, they speak about how you refuse to pay taxes to Caesar, these were really excuses. But their main reasons is Christ violated the Sabbath according to the tradition of the elders, which means they had their own way of Sabbath keeping that Jesus did not go along with. So even though they had the right day, but their principles were not exactly biblically correct. So today we have the opposite of that, right? We have people who are advocating for true principles that are in line with Sabbath keeping. Yeah, we need to rest. We need family time. Okay, fine. All Seventh-day Adventists will agree with that. But the issue now we have is the wrong day. So it's like if you flip the script, you could say like, oh wow, it's so amazing how that happens. And Jesus says, if they've done this to me, they will also do it to you. So again, like we've said earlier, nothing new under the sun. We are seeing Bible prophecy being fulfilled right before our eyes.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've all long known that it was going to come pushed popularly so, and I think perhaps maybe some generations might say, well, I'll see that on the news or something like that, or expecting it to come from some particular source. But I'll say one of the places we've been seeing a lot of this being pushed popularly is Twitter. Elon Musk now owns Twitter as X, right? But just some of the comments that we're seeing come across, here's one recently. One Christian nationalist stated, "We need to keep pushing it until blue laws comma, millstones for special punishments, comma, and are common. So,
Wasn't that the same post that was on your Facebook page? Is that the one?
yes, I have a pastor friend of mine from, I think it's Australia, who actually is keeping record of some of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was another follow-up statement that another blue check said that we basically do this without any coordination from higher ups. You can just decide to do if it's important to you.
Mm.
And one of them responded, "This is exactly backwards. There was a reason why Sabbath breaking was a capital crime in Israel. You don't economically incentivize those who refuse to honor the Lord's Day to the hurt of those who do." Now, when he's talking about a capital crime, they're referencing the idea that there was a death penalty back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear somebody talking about millstones for special punishments and are common, this is very, I guess, very much coercive in the direction that they're wanting to go.
Correct.
Um,
That's interesting because the Bible also tells us that the second beast is eventually going to cry to make an image to the first beast. So that
Yes.
means that there has to be a mentality set up that the people of the first beast, and we know no religious laws can be advocated without a group of people calling for it. So it's interesting if this thinking is already out there and it's becoming more prevalent today, and with all increasing, issues going on in the world today in natural disasters, they're going to have a perfect recipe and reasons to call for such a law. And that's becoming more and more prevalent today. And what I also notice is the Catholicization of America is, you notice a lot of that is also happening. It's not just Christian nationalism that are on the rise, but we also have many Roman Catholics are taking charge in both political and social issues and advocating for things that most people will agree with, but they have a common enemy, right? We have the leftist views and policies. We have to fight against that. But in an effort to supposedly get rid of a common enemy, they're gonna end up overreaching and get rid of some of God's people and violate their liberty of conscience as well.
It's interesting too. I see Inquisitor here is responding to uh, Western Catholic, something like that, and Right Wing Watch. Right Wing Watch actually played a clip from Joel Webbon here recently. Joel Webbon's another individual pushing for blue laws quite a bit, and Joel Webbon's statement was about actually talking about how we need to humanize people like Adolf Hitler. I'm just like, as a pastor, like, why would you say that? If you're trying to uphold the gospel and uphold Jesus Christ, um, I'm trying to understand, why would you go down that road and make such an inflammatory statement? So there's a certain brashness about some of the rhetoric that's coming out from some of these Christian nationalists. To me, it's quite concerning.
You say, Joe Webbon, he's something else, though. So what
Yeah.
was the name of that one? Christian nationalists degenerates, and the Constitution doesn't work anymore in this nation.
Yeah, Joel Webbon. It was actually published 8 days ago at the Right Wing Watch YouTube channel. Right Wing Watch News. Joel Webbon hopes the world will soon learn to humanize Hitler. Now, I know Right Wing Watch is coming from a political angle, folks. So I want to be clear: we're not here to advocate for politics, right or left.
No.
But from a spiritual perspective, this is a pastor who is advocating for humanizing Hitler. And to me, if you think about the anti-Semitism, in the context of how a lot of Christian nationalists view the Sabbath as a relic of Judaism, it's quite concerning. And it's interesting how Right Wing Watch is featuring a lot of these other individuals, R.N. McIntyre, Doug Wilson. There's a lot of some of these prominent Christian nationalists who are kind of working together.
Yeah, I'm almost there. But I think that's the one.
Yes, that's the one right there.
Okay.
Why can't we have nice things in the West, like tradition and nationalism, and a love for our people, not at the expense of other people, but in the order of mores, a prioritized love and devotion and allegiance to our people. Why can't we have America first? Why can't we have these kinds of things? And of course, the answer is because of the Austrian painter with a funny mustache. And yeah, so I like, why can't we think of peoples as being distinct, having differences and stemming from differences? Then, of course, disparities, and those disparities not necessarily necessitating injustice.
Mm.
It could be, that's absolutely possible, but not by necessity. You can have disparity strictly because of distinctions without injustice having taken place. Why can't we have those basic thoughts and beliefs? Well, because of an Austrian painter who might, depending on your World War II history, might have been a little overly zealous.
Is this serious?
Yeah, I gotta ask, like, why?
Yo, he triggers me so bad. I don't think anybody else has done a better job triggering me. I'm pretty calm for the most part. He takes a while to get on my nerves, but he does a great job. Like, is he serious? It's just the revision of history is
Yes.
baffling to me.
Yes, but we're gonna treat him like Napoleon, right? Like I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's like sympathy for Lucifer kind of thing. It's
Exactly.
it's out of
Exactly.
control. Oh, you become so desperate to get your way that you start aligning with some of the worst dictators ever. It's just too bad.
Yeah.
I guess an answer to his question could simply be that in order for you to get what you want, you have to create a religious state, in a sense, a state-run religion. So what does that mean? Well, he's going to have to violate everybody else's religion. So you're going to end up marginalizing the very people that you're supposedly advocating for. So let's see what's going on here.
I understand you're a native of Strongsville, Ohio, so I know the people there are very proud of your work, and so it made me think to have to ask.
Dr. O calls the man Mr. Sunday Law, so that's kind of where I got the name. Jonathan Berry, Mr. Sunday Law. So we're waiting for Mr. Sunday Law to be questioned, guys. That's what we are waiting for right now. So some people are thanking you in the chat. They're saying, thank you, Mr. James Bowen, for your vigilant report. Sunday Law, wish I could hear the hearing. Yes, you are about to hear it. We are waiting for him to be questioned. They're introducing a number of people right now, but I think he's up first to be questioned by the representative. So, yeah, that's what's happening.
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. And it's great to be with a fellow Ohioan. That is a great question, and I think it's so important to.
So she's being questioned at the moment. Okay.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think we could address here is, I see a lot of people asking the question, like, why should we oppose? Why should we stand up? Why should we say anything? Why should we get in the way of all of this? Don't we want this to happen so that, like, the closing events can come and we can all go home? I have a few thoughts on that, but I'm sure you've probably seen some people say something to that effect. What do you think about that?
It's two extremes, right? You want to avoid all of it, right? One, we do know Bible prophecy is going to be fulfilled and certain things are going to fall in line because the Bible says so. But we are told it is a sin to sit back and not do anything about it. We should advocate for religious liberty and religious freedom of conscience and so on. Even NY says, if we don't do anything, then our message has no value. So it's actually a good thing to be pushing back. Is going to give us serious credibility. Later on, they're going to say, I'm glad you were saying something when this was going on. So by not saying anything, if later on we come back and say, we knew this was going to happen, it's Bible prophecy. And they're going to be like, wait a minute, you knew this was coming and you said nothing?
Yes.
So in order for our message to even be trusted enough, it is now that the voice has to be heard. It's going to bring a serious revival and reformation, we are told, when stuff like this takes place. So yes, we're in the crux of history right now, and this is a good thing to be doing at the moment.
Absolutely. There's a quote from the Review and Herald Extra, December 24th, 1889, and that's 1 year after Alonzo Jones, almost to the day that Alonzo Jones stood, December 1888, before the Labor Committee then. And Ellen White wrote, "There are many who are at ease, who are, as it were, asleep. They say if prophecy has foretold the enforcement of Sunday observance, the law will surely be enacted. And having come to this
How?
conclusion, they sit down in calm expectation of the event, comforting themselves with the thought, well, God will protect his people in the day of trouble. But God will not save us if we make no effort to do the work he has committed to our charge. As faithful watchmen, you should see the sword coming and give the warning that men and women may not pursue a course through ignorance that they would avoid if they knew the truth."
Amen. Amen.
You know, I think about that and I'm thinking, we know the truth,
They don't.
but we're not the ones faced with a decision here about getting somebody like Jonathan Berry into office.
Mm-hmm.
We're the ones who, are tasked with giving that warning. And certainly, I believe our senators need to hear the loud cry as much as anyone. And in fact, they ought to be among the top, I think, who need to hear it because they have such responsibility on their hands
Mm-hmm.
of choosing individuals like this who will ultimately lead our nation down a very, very dark road of violating and negating the law of God. So,
Mm. Amen. Amen. Yeah, it's just it's unwise not to do something. It's not like you showing a lack of confidence in the Bible prophecies. We know things are going to happen, but we still should be fighting for religious liberty. It's just common sense to me to be doing that.
mm,
And also, the world has to know that there is a people who sides with neither camps. Like, we can stand on principles that either both right or left support as long as it aligns with scripture. But they have to know there is a group of people who stands for liberty of conscience.
mm.
And this is actually another opportunity for us to to stand firm and give a clear call out here on what the Bible says. And when we see religious liberties being violated, steps are taking place leading to that. By all means, we have every right to sound a voice of protest.
Yeah, we know that the devil's going to stand up and try and oppose truth. And, when the truth is preached about the third angel's message, when senators hear that message and the topic is brought up, that alone is going to cause agitation
Mm,
and cause, some of these issues to be brought to the forefront.
got it. Got it. Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if Senator Baldwin's addressing Barry yet or somebody else.
The chapter reads, just a quote, DOL should commit to honest study of the challenges for women in the world of professional work. The Women's Bureau at DOL tends towards a politicized research and engagement agenda that puts predetermined conclusions ahead of empirical study, end quote. Can you name a barrier that women face in the workplace?
Senator, thank you for the question. Thank you for the chance to talk about this. I want to start by identifying that the chapter is not focused on that single issue. It's a broader context looking at the swath of labor employment issues.
We can all agree on that. I'm asking about, can you name a barrier that women face in the workplace?
Certainly, I think at times there's very real sex discrimination, for example.
Okay. What about a barrier identified by the Women's Bureau, wage inequity?
Right. So that is right. That would be downstream from a variety of issues. One of which is going to be sex discrimination.
Okay. Another from that same office, the Women's Bureau, that you say has been politicized. Do you agree that access to child care is a barrier to work for women?
Access to child care is absolutely an issue that that a lot of women in the workplace have to deal with. It's an issue for men as well. Yes.
Congress created the Women's Bureau in 1920 to address issues women face at work. And through investigations into working conditions of women in factories, the agency helped establish the 40-hour work week and the Fair Labor Standards Act. This administration has proposed to eliminate the Women's Bureau. Do you support that?
I support whatever the administration decides on that, what President Trump supports, but that was not one of the policy proposals discussed in the chapter that I was the lead author of.
So since the administration has proposed to
All
eliminate
right.
the Women's Bureau, you do support that? Is that what I hear?
That will be, ultimately, Senator, that's a decision as between President Trump and this Congress.
Okay. It's a simple yes or no
He
question.
did
has
say he
proposed
supports
that.
every one of them. So
Yes, and I'm
thank
prepared
you.
to support the president.
Commissioner Lucas, I want to continue in the same line of questioning of my colleague, Senator Murray. The Equal Employment Opportunities Commission is charged with enforcing laws prohibiting workplace discrimination. However, as soon as you assumed the role of acting chair, you moved to dismiss every lawsuit filed by EEOC on behalf of workers who faced discrimination on the basis of their gender identity. Mm-hmm. One of those cases you moved to dismiss was on behalf of a farm worker on a farm in Illinois. In that case, the employer refused to call the employee by her name. Coworkers exposed themselves to her. And she was subjected to groping and sexual comments while at work. No employee should have to go through that. You moved to dismiss this case. Do you think it is appropriate for someone to be harassed like this anywhere, let alone at work?
Respectfully, Senator, I appreciate your question.
all right.
It's
That's a good.
It's interesting. She did start to mention the Fair Labor Standards Act there. I was wondering if it was going to
Yeah.
go into more about that, but we'll have to see further questions coming up if they start to probe there.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. There's a quotation I'm looking for from last day events where, yeah, she speaks about oppose Sunday law by pen and vote. And I've always asked myself, like, well, if there is a vote, what kind of vote is this going to be? So, because it's a state by state kind of laws, it's not going to be, is it going to be legislated on a federal level or on a local level? It seems like it's starting locally and slowly peaks up to the federal. So that means when it starts at a local level, God's people will have to oppose that from their particular state. So there will be voting taking place, making that decision then, if they can oppose it, whether or not this is going to be the case. But nevertheless, we should still voice against it. We are told to oppose it. Sitting down and do nothing is just as guilty. It's just as wrong.
You know, and the other point of this too, for time and a half pay, people question, whether or not that's actually stepping into God's law. But the reality is they are doing this in the name of the Sabbath. And when you're trying to implement financial policies that coerce with the intention and the express stated intention of encouraging communal rest, you're doing something in the name of God, and that is not according to the law of God. And so, I would say as Adventists, if we are standing up on behalf of him who we serve, we need to express concern about that.
Yeah. And also in the name of standing for the truth, because an effort to bring about laws to protect Sunday so workers can have time with their families sounds good in nature, but you have the wrong day. Because if you're going to use the Bible as your basis, you're keeping the wrong day as the Sabbath. So on that basis alone, we should be saying, excuse me, first of all, you got the wrong day. And secondly, this is going to go too far. But again, what I'm noticing that is the most dangerous pattern is this sympathy that they're creating for Sunday. It is that people have to sympathize and see Sunday as a special day, as something that is different from all the others. We know that's not really the case at all. If you were to go deep into history, you will find that Sunday laws have a direct parallel to Sunday worship and the sun god. It has nothing to do with God whatsoever. If there was ever an upfront, total disrespect or a replacement of God's law, an attack on the character of God, it is Sunday worship. Now, this doesn't automatically mean people who go to church on Sunday are bad people. We're not making an argument against people here. We're talking about a principle that goes against God's law. And this is why we can't sit back and just watch it happen. Like, they have to hear a voice of protest, even though people take an issue with us when we speak on this issue and say, hey, give better things to talk about, talk about the love of Jesus, talk about revival and, watching what the Pope is doing. Who cares? But no, well, God cares. I think God cares. I think he cares about his character and his truth. And people are ignorant of this thing, and false worship will damn the souls of individuals. So there goes something that, by all means, we should take into consideration while not neglecting the other stuff that are just as important as well.
Yeah, there's going to be, if his nomination goes forward, there's going to be a need, I would say, for those watching today. One of the questions that I've gotten from folks is, if I'm in a foreign country, is there anything that I can do about all of this? One thing I would say is if you go to each of these senators' web pages, there's an option to check a box if you're in a foreign country and still write in your concerns if you have some. So this is not something that our international brethren should feel that they're excluded from expressing their voice to United States Senator. I've also gotten some word that if the nomination moves forward, we're potentially looking at, especially with indication that his policies may very well be something that the administration adopts, we may very well be looking at in near future a nationwide activation of PARL. Now, I'm not PARL, and I can't speak on their behalf, but what I can foresee potentially occurring is if this moves forward, it's going to take all of us, and that means everybody watching here today. Oh, we got Barry back.
Employment laws. Our employment laws, vigorously enforced, can do a lot to stamp out the so-called shadow economy among employers who are seeking to look to exploit people who are in the country illegally. And that's a lot of these trafficking issues can be addressed in part through the authorities that I would be privileged to help enforce.
Yeah, Senator, thank you for the question. I think part of the Wage and Hour Division's responsibility is to enforce, as you know, the child labor elements of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and it's a very important part of every investigation. And I think the last several years have seen the increasing amount of trafficked children who are presenting forged and otherwise, fraudulent documents to be able to support child labor. And part of the work of the Wage and Hour Division is to make sure that we're enforcing the laws against employers that are intentionally really exploiting children and are not also being exploited
And
themselves.
specifically, unlike the last administration, if you were to find evidence of that, would you present that information to the state so that they might better oversee the welfare of those children?
Well, it's Senator, working with other enforcement agencies and other folks that have interest in enforcing the laws of this country is definitely something the Wage and Hour Division continues to do.
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you for your work in Florida. I think that unfortunately there are too many states and local prosecutors throughout the country that have turned a blind eye to this issue. And one of the things that I think is critically important to the Inspector General is hopefully upon confirmation is to taking a real look at what personnel and what resources are being allocated to child and human trafficking. And if it's not enough, we need to adjust it. And like I said to a couple of questions, I think the collaboration between prosecutors, whether it's on a state or a local level, and the work that you can do with local law enforcement agencies is really how to get this job done. Nobody knows their communities and who's doing what in those communities better than local cops, local investigators. And I think,
I think it goes back to the statement I read earlier. Oh man, Pastor Tom is here. This was my former senior pastor. That's my guy. He says we ought to obey God rather than man in the chat. Amen, Pastor Tom. When I was reading earlier is what they're doing is they're mangling this with a lot of things that you and I would support. Like who can speak against, child trafficking? We can say that a shadow economy where you will say undocumented individuals are working and pretty much changing the face of the economy. Well, that's not a good thing if you were to be fair. But also, there is the work, there is a service to God being mentioned in his statement, there is the family, and these are all good things, right? Trying to change some of these DEI policies under the Biden administration that went too far. These are all good things. We can't disagree with that. But at the heart of that, there is this component of Sabbath keeping. Now, my question is, hold a minute. He's speaking, so let me pause.
Senator, thank you for the question. I don't think the president would ask me to violate the law, but I would follow the law.
But at the heart of it is they haven't really they're keeping the Sabbath as one of their solution to the Labor Act law that they're talking about. The Sabbath is at the core of it. But in reference to the Sabbath, they're talking about Sunday. But I wonder if any of these representatives even take notice of that. Is that even a concern of theirs either? So we have to keep listening to see where this goes.
Note that the president and Mr. Vogt have refused to follow the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. He has pardoned people who were convicted of assaulting law enforcement on this campus. He is treating foreign policy as if it is his personal business, likely violating the Emoluments Clause. And this administration's failure to follow due process is a clear violation of law. So you might want to rethink the first part of your answers. Now, let me go to you, Mr. Rogers, for another question. The Wage and Hour Division field offices play a critical role in helping to ensure that workers get paid what they've earned. The Manchester, New Hampshire Wage and Hour Division office has been especially effective in this effort, recovering nearly $8 million for almost 5,600 Granite Staters in the last 5 years. Yet in March, DOJ terminated the lease for this office, the only such office in New Hampshire, effective August 31st, without any indication of whether there is a plan to continue having an office in New Hampshire. So, Mr. Rogers, if confirmed, will you commit to reviewing this action by DOJ and working with my office to keep the Manchester Wage and Hour Division office open?
Senator, thank you for the question. If I have the privilege of being confirmed, I'm happy to look into it. I don't have much insight into it now, not being in the building, but I'm happy to look into it and follow up with you.
I would look forward to that very much. This is kind of a classic DOJ thing. They terminated an office. They haven't indicated any kind of follow-up in terms of what workers in New Hampshire are supposed to do to make sure that their wages and hours are protected and that their rights are protected. And I would look forward to working with you on that. Representative Esposito, earlier this year, President Trump illegally fired the Department of Labor's Inspector General, along with several other inspectors general. Again, another example of the president not following the law. Do you support the firing of inspectors general without the president first providing the required statutory notice to Congress?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Senator. I believe, I'm not an attorney, but I believe that a court recently upheld President Trump's decision to fire the inspector generals.
Do you support his doing it without providing the required statutory notice to Congress?
I support that the American people elected President Trump to lead this country, and if President Trump decided, if I was confirmed, to dismiss me, I would understand.
Talk to me about your understanding of the role of Inspector General and the importance of independence from political influence, because that answer, the notion that you work for the president and not the American people, in an Inspector General's role is a concerning answer, because there are Inspectors General who have worked for multiple administrations, finding fault in multiple administrations of both political parties, and that's the whole point. They're supposed to be independent. So talk to me about your understanding of the role.
Well, thank you, Senator. I'm well aware of Inspector General, and just as I have in my entire career, I plan on, if confirmed, leading the Inspector General's office without fear or favor. I plan on, just as I did as a decorated New York City detective, working under multiple administrations between Mayor Bloomberg and then Mayor de Blasio, who single-handedly tried to destroy New York City, I still went out there and did my job regardless of who the leader is. I will continue to work independently, just as I have, to do the work of the Inspector General, and that is to rid the Department of Labor of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Will you commit to continuing any open investigations that were initiated by the last Inspector General?
I can't answer that question until I see what the investigations are.
That is also concerning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lucas, you are already cracking down on employers who discriminate against American workers in order to hire illegal immigrants as workers instead. Can you give us some examples of these anti-American national origin discrimination cases that you're working on?
Thank you so much. Well, I can't talk about confidential matters. I can talk about press matters that are public. Since 2019, the Commission has recovered almost $7 million for American workers, as recently as a $1.4 million recovery during my tenure as acting chair. And these often will entail a preference for a foreign worker at the expense of an American worker. The victims that we're recovering for are often a broad multiracial group. So we've recovered money for Black, white, and Asian workers. The fact patterns vary. A common pattern that we will see is an Hispanic preference.
We have to keep listening. So one of those questions can come up regarding that. It doesn't seem like it's like they're not addressing one person at a time. They're addressing all four of them, and they're being asked by different individuals on different principles of the policies. So, yeah, this could be a long one. But go ahead.
In the interim, one of the senators there did ask Barry, I happened to catch it on the other stream, whether or not he would uphold something to the effect of upholding the law versus listening to Trump. And his answer was not satisfactory to her, at least. And she had said that he was disqualified, at least in her opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not seeing the Sabbath issue brought up just yet. And it's possible that the senators here may not have find that particular topic. They may have other issues on their minds that crowds that one out. In which case, it may move forward, not being brought up. We'll have to see. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying too. They probably have no idea. They may not see it as we see it too. So from their perspective, what if they think this is a good one? They might think, okay, there's nothing here that's bad, and I go to church on Sunday myself. So so they may not see things from the way that we do. So without us speaking out and advocating for and pointing out the error that's in this one, I don't think many of them will even take notice.
Yeah. There will come a time, one of the momentous things that caught the public's attention and actually kind of killed Sunday laws back the first time around. One of the newspaper articles we got, the end of Sunday laws, was actually one of the things that our religious liberty had promulgated really heavily at the early 20th century, was a picture of a group of Adventists that were walking under armed guard.
Yes.
And just that picture alone, displayed widely before the public, really created a sense of, wait, you're walking these people under armed guard because they went out and plowed their field. Not that they were going and burning down a city and rioting. And, you look at what's going on out in California right now. No, it wasn't that they were arrested for, but actually doing honest labor on a day that they conscientiously believed was a work day according to the law of God.
Yeah.
And that image right there really, in the public mind, captured people's attention. So it may take something like that to kind of bring the concern to the forefront. They may not recognize it now, but we'll have to see.
But when you also read the Bible, you can also understand how there could be a repetition of this in the book of Daniel, chapter 3? Well, there's the image of Nebuchadnezzar in that chapter 3. Chapter 4 has Nebuchadnezzar's conversion. Chapter 5. So Daniel chapter 6, under King Darius, when they put a law saying that no, you cannot worship any other king, King Cyrus. You cannot worship any other king. You cannot pray to any other gods but him. But if you notice that the way the law was written, the political leader of the time had no idea that the goal was to, get Daniel in trouble. So he went along with the law thinking, oh, this is a good thing. This is going to be good for my kingdom. But eventually it backfired really bad. But the thing is, it seems like these political leaders also are just as blind. They cannot see. They might be thinking, oh, these are good things. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to see here until the modern day Daniels are in trouble. It seems like everything is gonna happen just as prophecy says it's going to take place. But we should try as hard as we can to open the eyes of these men, open the eyes of the king so that they can see. But I think to a large degree, they are so blind by the Babylonian wine. It's really difficult for them to see where these things are going. Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah. So one of the things I was commenting on previously is when this moves forward, um, it may require nationwide activation of our religious liberty to really coordinate as a team to wake up all of our churches to respond and to call in when that happens.
Yeah. I wonder what our churches are doing right now, what our religious liberty department is doing concerning this. Is this even a thought of theirs, or is that even something they're considering? I haven't really heard much when it comes to them. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, so we do have some individuals in religious liberty reaching out and trying to warn and oppose some of these issues. I know the Southern Union has Amira. Amira's been doing some really, really good work in actually trying to communicate some of this on their podcast, Waymarks, also the magazine Waymarks, I think it is for religious liberty. One of the things that I think some of our religious liberty leaders are experiencing is when they've tried to warn about Sunday laws or even talk about concerns like Christian nationalism, there are a lot of people who are getting so wrapped up in politics that it's very difficult for them to recognize, hey, this sounds like you're just anti-political party as opposed to, a concerned about or having a legitimate concern about Christian nationalism.
Wow.
And so there's some pushback that I think some of our leaders are experiencing. I know that some of us have seen individuals like maybe Diop at the top who said some things about Catholicism that we have some serious concerns about. But I don't think as a whole our religious liberty department, our PARL department is like that. I think that we've got a lot of people who are honestly trying to do the best they can. And some may not have maybe the YouTube skills or following or whatever, or may just be burdened with all of the internal duties that are placed upon them to not necessarily have that vocal reach. And so I think it's important for those of us who have, maybe a platform or a voice, we need to bear up our leaders like Aaron and Hur did to Moses and to try and help them. I know some of them we've had some communications with, and we have seen, at least in the people that we've talked to, and I'm not just talking about Southern Union, but we have seen some people who are genuinely trying and want to have a voice and want to coordinate and want to reach out and express concerns. And in the case of the Southern Union, their concern is not just Jonathan Berry, but a whole long list. So there's a much broader religious liberty concern about what's coming down the pipeline. So I would encourage reaching out to your union or local conference PARL director, get an email chain going, get a thread going about your concerns if you have some about Jonathan Berry, and find out how we can work with our local religious liberty leaders at our various churches and make sure everybody's aware, because I'm running into so many people who have not even heard of Jonathan Berry. Like, who is this guy? They don't know anything about him up to this point. And I'm like, we've been talking about him for a couple of years, but that, I'm sure Moses ran into similar issues in his day. We need to exercise patience with those people who may not know about it at this point, who need help. A lot of people don't know how to navigate the website and how to email or how to contact their senator. So there's going to be a need there for individual church members to reach out and say, hey, how can I help you, so that we can all work together and express our concerns.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Because my expectation is, hey, you guys should know this because you guys should be on top of this conversation of anything, because, this is the United States, right? This is the belly of the beast, and, but I totally understand. This is when we come in and do what we have to do, and the people who are watching, they have a job to do to assist these leaders to take a stand as well, correcting their views. So I'm not sure how much longer you want to go with this. I think
Worker and dismantling the
Yeah, I'm not sure how long it's going to go. I've got
Yeah.
another maybe 10 minutes I can do, and then I've got to
Yeah.
run this morning, but I will check back the stream afterwards to see if there's
Yeah,
anything
I'm-
that happened in my absence. But
that's what I'm gonna do too. I'm gonna check back the stream, and then if I find anything there, I will include that in my edit so that people can have that piece as well. So yeah, let's take another 2 minutes of their discussions, and if you have anything else you want to add,
sure.
you can share that, and we can end up the live stream.
Ms. Chavez de Reamer on a topic that's extremely important to me and to my state, and that's illegal child labor. I relayed to the Secretary whistleblower information that I have received from an employee at Tyson Foods alleging that that individual employee had witnessed underage labor in a Tyson's plant. That same whistleblower also had information regarding other underage employees at other plants, and this is by no means an isolated incident. The New York Times even has done a comprehensive series of stories on underage illegal child labor in various poultry processing plants around the country, including Tyson Food. Now, I'll tell you why it's particularly irksome to me, because Tyson Food unceremonially closed 2 major plants in the state of Missouri after telling our workers and farmers they would remain open. They canceled contracts with our farmers, putting many of them into bankruptcy. They fired all of the workers, sending many of them into destitution. And what we learned instead is that Tyson is happy to hire and use illegal, I mean, hire is the wrong word. They're happy to use illegal child labor in their supply chains. So they're punishing Missourians, they're closing our plants, they're breaking our contracts, but they're hiring illegals and they're using child labor. So let me just ask you, are you familiar, broadly speaking, with these reports as it regards Tyson and other poultry processors?
Senator, I'm generally aware of the reports, but not the particulars that you mentioned.
Well, following my letter to the Secretary, the acting head of the department, the division that you are now nominated to fill, responded to me and said the following: protecting children against illegal child labor is one of the top priorities of the department and the Wage and Hour Division. Wage and Hour investigates every actionable complaint, tip, and referral about child labor violations, takes those allegations very seriously. He went on to say that the Wage and Hour Division is engaged, I'm quoting now, the Wage and Hour Division is engaged in ongoing investigations of Tyson Foods and its contractors under the FLSA. So let me here's my question for you. Should you be confirmed, will you continue WHD's open investigation of Tyson Food?
Well, Senator, I can't comment without knowing more of the details, but I certainly commit to continue to investigate offensive child labor wherever it may be.
Okay, good. And let me just ask you a little more specifically, what actions would you anticipate taking to ensure that illegal child labor is not possible in this country in the year 2025?
Well, Senator, there's a lot of ways in which the department can focus on continuing to do, as Secretary Chavez de Reamer mentioned, to double down on enforcing against oppressive child labor. And one of those ways is to use the resources that we have and to use the data that's available to drive down where those violations are most likely, take tips such as yours, and to move forward as aggressively as possible to make sure that we can eradicate unlawful child labor in this country.
I just want to emphasize to you that this issue is of the highest importance to me.
All right, well, we're going to keep watching, guys, as we often do, and also James Warren, you keep me updated on anything that comes your way, and then we can certainly update the people as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the chance to stream. We'll continue to check back on this and see what happens. But thank you once again.
Yeah, it's been great. For those of you that are watching, I just want to say thank you once again. FYI, we do have a couple interviews scheduled, so I'll keep you guys updated on things. You know how we do. God bless you all. Thanks for hanging out with us. Anything that comes down the pipe, for those of you that are watching right now, make sure you let us know as well, and we'll make sure we document everything and address them on the channel as we often do. All right, James Boring, God bless you.
Blessed.